Another update in Marvel Future Fight has come and gone in 2025, and the players are saying the same thing for the past 7 months now. The characters, the uniforms, the reworks are not good enough. We need more buffs. Players are already asking for Emma Frost buffs. I just finished making a video yesterday about how Shalabal is almost good enough, but she needs buffs. Commander's video this morning, just a couple of hours ago, echoes the same sentiment. Shalabal is close, but no cigar. She's not good enough to be good, not even to be top dog. And so I wanted to talk about this. I've talked about this a lot this year, more than it feels like in the past few years. But it really is an issue that doesn't have a lot of complicated answers. It's a very, very simple issue. And I understand that from the outside looking in as a player, we don't have all of the answers. And I understand that the devs have certain answers that we don't have, but I'm going to try and approach this in the simplest way possible. Because if you just look at the data, it doesn't support what's going on here. And I've seen players, to their credit, make some speculations on why things are going the way that they're going. Like, why are we getting so few good reworks like Storm? And then, you know, on the other hand, we're getting so many bad reworks or middling reworks like Groot, like Beast, like Hawkeye, etc. And oh, maybe there's something new coming. Maybe with the, let's say, Galactus Epic Quest, we're going to get a native tier 4 character, and that's going to be the big shakeup to the meta. Sure, that's possible. That could be an answer. I'm not saying that that's a... It could be. That kind of makes sense in a way. But that doesn't explain why out of 44 uniforms and characters this year, only about 11% of them have been worthwhile for the majority of players. Now, I actually went and plotted this visually so you can see what I'm talking about. This is just a simple tier list, and I went and I ranked all of the uniforms in the game, whether they're meta or not meta. And meta means you need the uniform for at least one game mode. And this is a very low bar to pass. It's a very low bar to pass. And only 5 characters pass this bar. Now, you can get really nitpicky and say, well, Alex, if you're on specifically stage 40 to 45 of this new World Boss Legend, you're going to need Nick Fury support. Okay, we're not going to get... Therefore, he's meta. We're not going to get that specific. We're not going to get that crazy. Oh, Alex, you need Kingpin for this one day of ABL if you're pushing for the absolute highest scores. I said for the majority of players. The majority of players are not competing for the top 100 or the top 50 of ABX ABL scores. The majority of players, 95% plus of players, are not playing World Boss Thanos at stage 40. This is just not happening. So actually, you can take Bullseye and Crescent off the list and it gets even smaller. And you could even argue that you don't even need Cyclops. But let's be generous and at least give them this. 11% of the uniforms this year. Even if we're a little bit more generous and we add a couple of more uniforms here, look at how bad. Look at how bad this looks. The vast majority of uniforms this year are just complete skips, complete ignores, just completely bad. And not only have I bought these uniforms and invested in these characters, I've tier 4'd a lot of these characters. And they're just not good. They're not good. And the majority of players, frankly, can just ignore them, can just skip them. And this is absolutely different than past years. In past years, by the time you get to the anniversary, there are must-buy uniforms. You got to get these uniforms, guys. They're really good. It's a new buff effect. It's a new support effect. It's a new DPS. We really only have, genuinely speaking, we really only have one new DPS this year, and that's Storm. That's insane. Like, if you ignore score-based game modes like ABX, ABL, where doing the most damage is not actually what's happening, it's more about hit counts and sort of like combos, then you actually only have one new DPS thus far. July is over. That's 7 months of the year. More than 50% of the year, and you've released a single DPS unit. And this has to be paired with the fact that they introduced the new Elite Gear system. This is insanity, right? This is insanity. You can't have such a low success rate. You're failing as developers. right? Like, just plain and simple, you're failing as developers, and you're wondering why maybe the game isn't. Maybe the game is. Well, I don't want to get into the revenue because honestly, I think the revenue for the game is fine, and I think that's probably one of the big reasons why the devs do not feel compelled to rework characters, because their way of doing things is working. Now, I know it's going to lead a lot of people to the boycott word. That's for another video. That's for another time. But what I really want to focus in on here is just how simple it would be to reach a better sort of happy medium. Because as ugly as this looks, there may be some sort of method to their madness. And we've talked about this in previous videos. We talked about it earlier in the video, where maybe something new is coming, and so they can't be sort of power creeping constantly if they're planning for like one big power creep when, let's say, the Galactus Epic Quest comes out, or whatever, Mephisto Tier 4, or whatever it is, right? You don't want to take the shine off of something that's coming soon by, you know, if it's your birthday in August and I'm giving you little gifts January, February, March, April, then the gift I give you in August is not going to really feel like a gift. I understand that. Listen, I have sympathy for the devs. It's a difficult job. Not all characters can be strong, right? This is not possible, by the way. For people that are wondering, oh, can we just make every meta? This is not possible. This is not a world that we can live in. And trust me, you don't want to play this game. This game, the game that does this, is so toxic and so, difficult for players to enjoy that it's not really worth it. Okay? This is not a good game. There's ads now on Tier Maker. It's awful. It's all the kangaroo, yeah. By the way, we didn't even rank the new uniforms, but big surprise here, guys. Big surprise they're not meta. But listen, we don't want this either. We certainly don't want this. But the alternative, what we have right now, is not what we want either, right? We need something more in the middle. And in particular, like, sure, new characters shouldn't be meta. Like, you know, they're new characters, right? Okay, really, like, niche characters shouldn't be meta, right? Like, super duper niche characters, you know, shouldn't necessarily be meta. Sorry, Elena. You know, characters that, listen, not every character can be meta, right? So some characters are just support characters. We understand that. They've been established as support characters in the game for a long time. Sure. You could still be left with a pretty good amount of character. Like, look, this is bad. Look what I just did, right? I took out all the supports. I took out some, lesser known characters, some super niche characters, and you're still left with close to 50-50. I wasn't even trying to get to 50-50. I was just looking at characters based on whether they were new characters, not uniforms, whether they were supports, or whether they just weren't that popular. And we get this. And sure, you can like swap some characters here and there, right? It doesn't have to be exactly this list and exactly that is. Like, you could drop Crescent back down. You could bring Shalabal up. You could drop Sharon down because she's not that popular. You could bring up Captain America. You can do a couple of things. But you get to like a 50-50, right? You get to a 50-50. And again, these characters don't, like, to be meta in this game is not, it doesn't mean that they're going to crush Null in PvP and they're going to be obliterating Doctor Strange in PvE. The devs are not really thinking to now criticize them. They're not thinking wide. They're thinking very, very narrow. And that's why we've gotten, a year of updates where you only have a couple of good characters, because of the choices that they've made. And so you go back to it, and this is what we get. Because they see the game in such a narrow way. They see a nebulous PvP where they need Null and Sentry to be at the top, and then they just see ABX, ABL with a bit of trickle over into World Boss. What happened to Dimension Rifts? Rogue is a seasonal that's almost 2 years old, and she's still the best for farming. Why not release a new farming character? Why not release a new character who is clearly really good for dispatch? Why not release a character who's just really good for zombie survival and not really much else? We don't have to see how the sausage is made, right? Just because a character is good for one game mode doesn't have to make them good for all game modes. The devs have like secret code. It sounds silly, but basically they can make a character just good for one game mode. right? They can just code hidden into the character, right? Like the character is going to do an extra 50% damage in Dimension Rifts, but they're going to do minus 25% damage in all other content. And sure, that might feel uncomfortable to say out loud, but you're not going to be able to tell in game. You won't be able to tell. But what you will be able to tell is, hey, Rogue's really good for Dimension Rifts. Now, I'm oversimplifying it. The way that the devs actually do it, if they wanted to do something specifically like Dimension Rifts, is they create a character who, you know, has cancelable skills, has large AoE, does enough damage to like one-shot the mobs, doesn't have long animations that they get stuck in, has a very fast base movement speed. It's not, I'm oversimplifying it by just saying, you know, plus 50% damage in this game mode, minus damage in that other game mode, okay? There's a much more complicated thing that they can do, but the devs understand this. I don't need to explain it because it's for the devs to do it, but they can do that. They can do that, and they should be doing that, and they're not doing that. And why they're not doing that, I don't know. That's where they lose me as a commentator, right? I'm really trying to thread the needle here. I'm not saying we should, you know, boo, every update should be really good. Every update needs to be meta. Every update needs, you know, a meta character. That's not what I'm trying to say. And I know that some players in the community or some people watching want me to say that or want that to be the case. And I don't think it's healthy for the game because there needs to be a balance, right? A lot of people were complaining about Shala Ball. Oh, it's not fair to free-to-play players. Okay. You know what else is not fair to free-to-play players? If every single update has a meta shift. That's not fair to free-to-play players because then that's a uniform every single update that they have to buy, that they feel pressure to buy, FOMO, etc. And so I made that video, are bad uniforms actually good? You know, are bad updates actually good for the game, good for casual players, etc.? It gives them time to hoard for players like this. But here's the problem. You can't have bad uniforms that encourage players to hoard and then also release an expensive crystal character, and that character is also bad. What are we doing here? Right? People quit over stuff like this. Players quit because of this kind of stuff. Because there's just nothing to do in the game anymore. It gets boring. Right? It gets boring. And that's what the characters are for. They're to keep players entertained with new stuff. Shiny jangling keys. We haven't had a shiny jangling key since Storm. And before Storm, there was no one. Storm was the first real hype moment of 2025. For Marvel Future Fight. I genuinely don't know if the devs know this, but they should do a poll or something. They should check their social media. People were really disappointed about pretty much every update this year besides Storm's X-Men 97 update. Don't get me wrong. We were excited before the Thunderbolts update. We were excited before the Daredevil update. But as soon as that turd landed, it was garbage. It was Suregi everywhere. And Storm was the only one where we got excited, and then it landed, and it was like, boom, nuclear bomb. And we were like, hell yeah. And it's nuclear bomb versus, you know, coughing baby with all the other updates this year. So, yeah, listen, it's a really simple solution. Just make the characters good for niche things. That's it. That's it. But we don't have that. We have a bunch of supports, and then we have a bunch of like middling characters that are just not good. That are just like, yeah, I guess you could use her in Team Battle Arena. You could if you wanted to, but you don't have to. Oh, okay. So like the other 500 uniforms in the game that I could use, but I don't have to use. Yeah, sure. Like I could use Hulkling in World Boss. Yeah, I could. Sure. Yeah. I'm not going to, but I could. But like that's not where we should be, right? There should be at least one uniform every update where players are thinking, okay, where does this fit? Where does it, like, it's a puzzle. They forgot about the puzzle. There needs to be a puzzle that the players are completing the puzzle with these new uniforms, with these new characters. None of these characters fit into the puzzle, so they don't really fit into the game, so they don't feel like they're part of the game. They just feel like Barbies, which is a word I haven't used in a long time. So yeah, it's really, really simple. I had a more complicated answer kind of ready, talking about, you know, where the devs want the power of the character to be versus where the players want the power of the character to be. And you put those two together, and then it equals the usage rate of the character. Because the devs have those statistics. They sort of show them a little bit here. This is kind of bullshit though. But they sort of show them here, and you can see. Look at this. Look at this. Of the characters that I ranked, Storm, Sentry, and Cyclops, right? Bullseye and Crescent are the only ones that don't appear, and that's what I said, right? And if you look at the recent tier 4s, Doctor Strange is from last year, but characters from this year, Sentry, Cyclops, Storm. Wow, did I just make that up, or is the community, you know, trying to tell something? So the devs have, and you could look after Emma, Null's from last year, right? Null and Doctor Strange are from last year. So 6 of the top characters are not even from this year. That's pretty bad for tier 4s, right? So the devs have this information and way more, right? They have detailed statistics on the usage rates. And so if they want the usage rates to be higher, aka they want players to use these characters to tier 4 them, then they need to bump up how strong the characters are, because the community is telling itself the characters are bad. So the devs have to step in and say, okay, listen, we're going to buff Shalabal by 5%. We're going to buff Emma Frost by 5%. Just make small incremental buffs. You don't have to do it every update. You don't have to do it for every character, but you ought to do it once in a while for community cohesion, right? To keep the community happy, to keep the community engaged. Because otherwise people tune out, they quit, they boycott, etc. And then the game kind of loses its shine. But what do I know? Maybe the game is as good as it's ever been. Spending is up. And, you know, in this kinds of society, that's the only thing that matters. Spending. Anyways, boys, hit me up in the comments down below. Let me know what you think of this ongoing fiasco. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.